I've become very interested in the notion of resilience and how to prevent people from developing psychological and psychiatric problems. And one of the main reasons people end up with stress in their lives and end up needing to come and see someone like me is because of difficulty in relationships. And one particular area of relationships which seems to cause a lot of stress is the romantic side of life. As a result of my interest in this area of how to help people become more skilled with romance, I wrote a book which became a bestseller called Simply Irresistible: The Psychology of Seduction. Now, it's Valentine's Day again, and many people will be exasperated by the fact it's Valentine's Day. They see it as a crass commercialization and exploitation of this very, very important and tender emotion of romance or love. And so a lot of people kind of turn their back on the idea of being romantic on this day. One of the reasons why people are cynical about Valentine's Day is they think that intimacy and love and romance should be spontaneous things and not scheduled. It's a whole big subject which we'll discuss on another occasion, but in fact, practically anything we do in life is actually scheduled. So is it possible to schedule love, which is kind of what Valentine's Day seems to be suggesting, is a big question that we'll come back to on another point on another video. However, if you are interested in engaging with the whole project of Valentine's Day, one of the questions that then arises is, what is the correct strategy? The typical Valentine's Day strategy is to send cards, flowers, and chocolates to the person that you love. And the psychological, dispassionate, scientific, somewhat cold-hearted analysis of what you're doing there is you're sending reassurance that that person is the object of your intentions and your attraction and interest, and this will heighten the reciprocation of their love. So it's about the idea that on Valentine's Day, we're trying to create a kind of intensity of romance. And so the idea is you send them gifts, you send them what we might call in psychology and psychiatry, reassurance that they are indeed loved. So one of the questions is whether this is actually the correct strategy if you want to amplify or up the attraction between two people. Another way of thinking about that would be whether you wanted to intensify the feeling of romance or passion on Valentine's Day. Is the chocolates and flowers strategy the correct one to follow? In fact, there's been recent psychological research that would suggest that is the wrong strategy to follow. And this research I've written about in my blog on Psychology Today, and you can find that if you Google my name, Dr. Raj Persaud, Psychology Today and Valentine's Day. So I won't go into the technical details of the research, but it's based on a theory in psychology called emotional intensity theory. And emotional intensity theory is about the idea that if you want to intensify emotions, or the conditions under which emotions tend to get more intense, are ones where there's an obstacle to the emotion. So, for example, if you're feeling hungry, the longer there's an obstacle for you to eat, the hungrier and hungrier you will get. You're a darn sight more hungry 24 hours after your last meal than an hour after your last meal. Another way of thinking about this from the perspective of emotional intensity theory is think about the motivation and the emotional intensity you experience if you're playing a game of tennis. I use many tennis analogies in my talks because I play a lot of tennis and I'm a somewhat competitive character. So imagine that you desire to win a tennis game. You're playing an opponent, you arrive on the court, and you discover as you play the game that the person you're playing against isn't very good at tennis, and you're beating them rather easily. The intensity and the drive to win, the emotional intensity with which you experience the desire to play tennis, I suggest, will tend not to be very high because you're finding it easy to win. You don't really have to pay that much attention to the game anymore. Imagine, however, you arrive on the tennis court and the opponent is much better than you and they're slaughtering you on the tennis court. Again, emotional intensity theory predicts that when you discover that you've got no chance of winning and you're going down 6-love in the set, that the emotional intensity you'll experience in terms of the desire to win and your engagement with the game will drop off rather dramatically as well. So in other words, emotional intensity theory predicts that to have the most heightened emotional intensity when you play a game of tennis, you play against an opponent where you discover there's a real chance of losing, but there's also a chance of winning. And now you're really engaged. It's a difficult game. Achieving victory is going to be difficult, but remains possible. Notice something. Emotional intensity theory is saying that you have to have a certain amount of uncertainty as to whether you're going to attain victory to amplify the emotional intensity with which you play the game. Now, if we transfer this theory to love, and indeed a recent experiment conducted by psychologists who subscribe to emotional intensity theory has found that if you engineer a situation whereby the person you love has become a bit more insecure about the relationship, this amplifies actually emotional intensity. And the research study was published whereby they manipulated insecurity that people felt in a relationship, and they found that when people were completely secure, there were rather average levels of emotional intensity in terms of desire and attraction. However, if you extremely made the couple feel very insecure about their relationship, again, emotional intensity dropped off. There was a kind of sweet spot where there was a certain level of uncertainty as to whether the relationship was going to continue, which amplified emotional uncertainty. This theory is very interesting, I think, and I think people neglect it. It explains why we tend to feel the most passion and emotional intensity at the beginning of a relationship, because that's the moment at which we're most insecure as to whether the relationship has actually any future. The more and more secure we get, maybe emotional intensity begins to die. So when people talk about how to rekindle passion in a relationship, one of the reasons why this is a difficult question to answer is emotional intensity theory suggests what you have to do is actually bring a little bit of uncertainty and insecurity to the relationship to amplify passion. Now, what does this mean practically in terms of Valentine's Day? There are certain things you might think about in terms of Machiavellian approach of exploiting emotional intensity theory. And one of them would be, for example, that when your lover presents you with chocolates and flowers at the beginning of the day and a card, you look a bit blankly at them, and you only present your gifts towards the end of the day when they become a bit insecure about whether anything was actually happening. So the notion of the unexpected or the surprise on Valentine's Day may amplify relationship insecurity and therefore emotional intensity. Taken to an extreme, what this would mean is you went to a restaurant with your lover, you would flirt heavily with the waiter or waitress, or maybe with an ex-boyfriend on the phone during the dinner. I'm not advising that you do that, but it's one of the logical places you end up if you subscribe to emotional intensity theory. So I would recommend that you have a look at my article on the Psychology Today blog. It's got the title about, is your Valentine's Day strategy the correct one, or have you got it all wrong? Many thanks for viewing this video, and we will be posting more in the future. Thank you very much.